The house went quiet in a way I didn't know silence could exist. After the funeral, after the relatives stopped calling, after the condolences dried up, it was just me and the echo of a life that used to breathe beside me. I had been a wife for so long that I didn't know how to exist without the weight of that word on my chest. Every object reminded me of him. His shoes by the door. His mug in the sink. Even the clock sounded louder, like it was accusing me of still being here. Grief didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves that knocked the air out of me at the most ordinary moments. Folding laundry. Opening the fridge. Waking up and realizing there was no one to tell good morning to. Nights were the worst. The bed felt too big, too cold, like it was swallowing me whole. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped eating enough. Some days I didn't even open the curtains. That's when my son stepped in. He didn't do it dramatically. He didn't lecture me or push me. He just showed up. Groceries appeared in the kitchen. Bills were neatly stacked and paid. He sat with me in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes not saying anything at all. He reminded me to drink water, to take my medicine, to breathe when the grief tightened its grip. I watched him grow into a role I never wanted him to have so soon that I leaned on him more than I should have. I knew it, and I hated myself for it. He was supposed to be living his own life, not holding together the pieces of mine. Yet every time he checked on me, every time he asked if I was okay, something in me relaxed. Not because he replaced his father, he never could, but because I wasn't invisible in my pain. Still, something was missing, and I was ashamed to admit it even to myself that I wasn't just lonely. I felt erased. No one looked at me like a woman anymore. I was a widow, a mother, a responsibility to be managed. I missed being desired, missed being noticed in ways that had nothing to do with survival. I buried that thought deep, telling myself it was inappropriate, selfish, even wrong. Grief, I decided, was supposed to be noble and quiet. But grief doesn't ask for permission. One afternoon, as I sat alone after my son left for work, the silence felt heavier than usual. I realized that while he had helped me stand again, he couldn't fill the emptiness that came from losing partnership, intimacy, and shared history. He gave me strength, but he couldn't give me warmth of that kind. And I knew he shouldn't. That was the moment I understood something dangerous about myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was craving escape from the ache, even if it meant stepping somewhere I shouldn't. I told myself it was harmless to want conversation, connection, something to distract me from the constant ache in my chest. I didn't know yet how far that need would take me. I only knew that the quiet was no longer enough, and the choices I was about to make would change how I saw myself forever. I didn't go looking for anyone. That's the lie I told myself first. I said it just happened, that life placed him in my path at a moment when I was too weak to resist conversation. The truth is simpler and harder to accept. I was open in a way I hadn't been in years, and that openness made me visible. He was someone I already knew, but only on the surface. A familiar face who had always existed on the edges of my life. Polite, distant, forgettable. After my husband's death, that distance disappeared. He asked how I was doing and didn't rush away when I answered honestly. He listened without interrupting, without offering solutions. That alone felt intoxicating. At first, our conversations were harmless. Short exchanges that turned into longer ones. He remembered details. He noticed when my voice sounded tired. He told me I didn't have to pretend to be strong. No one had said that to me before. Everyone else praised my resilience. He acknowledged my weakness, and somehow that felt kindred. I caught myself waiting for those moments, adjusting my day around them. When my phone buzzed with his name, my heart responded before my mind could stop it. I hated that reaction. I told myself it was just human to crave attention after months of being surrounded by grief and responsibility. Still, I didn't mention him to my son. That omission should have warned me. He spoke to me like I was still a person with depth, not just a woman marked by loss. He asked what I wanted, not what I needed. That question lingered long after the conversations ended. I hadn't thought about what I wanted in years. Wanting felt indulgent, almost immoral. There were moments when I tried to pull back. I shortened replies. I reminded myself of boundaries. I even convinced myself I was being dramatic, imagining meaning where there was none. But then he would say something gentle, something precise, something that landed too perfectly in the hollow space inside me. And the walls I rebuilt would quietly fall again. I began paying attention to how I looked before seeing him. Not for anyone else, just for that fleeting sense of being noticed. I told myself it was harmless, that I wasn't betraying anyone by enjoying conversation. After all, I was alone. I had buried my husband. I had earned the right to feel something other than sadness. The guilt came anyway. It arrived softly, like a whisper I could ignore if I stayed busy enough. I felt it when my son talked about his plans and I realized part of my mind was elsewhere. I felt it when I laughed at something that wasn't meant for my ears alone. I felt it most when I caught myself hoping for more time, longer talks, fewer interruptions. Nothing physical happened. Not yet. But something inside me had already shifted. I was sharing pieces of myself that should have remained guarded. I was letting someone else step into a space that grief had made dangerously open. I knew it, even as I pretended I didn't. The line wasn't crossed in one dramatic moment. It blurred slowly, quietly, until I could no longer tell where loneliness ended and betrayal began. And by the time I realized how far I had gone, turning back felt harder than moving forward. I wish I could say there was a single moment where everything clearly broke, where I could point to 1 second and say that's when I lost control. But it didn't happen like that. It unfolded in fragments, in silences that lasted too long, in looks that carried meaning we both pretended not to see. By the time I admitted the truth to myself, the truth had already settled in comfortably. The conversations changed first. They grew heavier, slower, filled with pauses that said more than words ever could. We talked less about grief and more about ourselves, about what we missed, about who we used to be before life narrowed us down into roles and responsibilities. I heard myself say things I hadn't planned to say. Confession slipped out without resistance, and instead of pulling back, he leaned in. There was a night when the loneliness felt unbearable. My son had checked on me earlier, reminding me to rest, reminding me that I wasn't alone. After he left, the house fell quiet again. That familiar ache returned, sharper this time, mixed with something restless. When I reached out to the other man, it wasn't an accident. I knew exactly why I was doing it. I just didn't want to face what it meant that we met under the excuse of needing to talk. No one touched at first. We sat close enough to feel each other's presence, close enough for restraint to feel like effort. When our hands brushed, neither of us pulled away. That hesitation, that failure to stop, mattered more than anything else. It was the moment I stopped pretending this was harmless. What followed wasn't reckless or loud. It was quiet, intimate, and heavy with emotion. There was no passion without consequence, no escape without cost. Even as I let myself feel wanted, comforted, alive again, a part of me stood back and watched in disbelief. I knew I was betraying something sacred, not just my marriage but my own values. That knowledge didn't stop me. It only followed me afterward. The guilt arrived immediately. It sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't shift. I went home and scrubbed my hands as if that could erase what I had allowed to happen. I avoided mirrors because I didn't want to see the version of myself that stared back without innocence. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was filled with restless thoughts and unfinished sentences. The days that followed were worse. I became careful in ways that made everything obvious. I guarded my phone. I measured my words. I forced smiles around my son, hating myself for the secrets standing between us. He trusted me completely. That trust burned more than any fear of being discovered, that I told myself it wouldn't happen again. I told myself it was a moment of weakness, a response to grief, something I could lock away and move past. But the truth was uglier. I wanted the feeling back. I missed the way I had felt seen, even knowing the cost. That craving scared me more than the act itself. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And every step forward after that felt heavier, because I wasn't just hiding what I had done. I was hiding who I was becoming, and I didn't know how to stop. I didn't get caught. That's the part people expect, the confrontation, the explosion, the moment where everything collapses. It never came. What came instead was quieter and somehow worse. My son started looking at me differently, not with suspicion but with concern. He asked if I was sleeping, if I was eating, if something was bothering me. Each question felt like a reminder of how deeply I had failed someone who had only ever tried to protect me. One evening, he sat across from me and talked about his father, about how much he missed him, about how he worried I was carrying too much alone. I nodded and listened, my throat tight, my chest aching with the weight of everything I hadn't said. He reached for my hand and told me I didn't have to be strong all the time. That moment broke something open inside me. I realized the difference between the care he gave me and the comfort I had chased elsewhere. That night, I lay awake and faced myself without excuses. I stopped blaming grief. I stopped pretending loneliness had forced my hand. I had made a choice. And if I didn't make another one soon, I would lose more than my peace. I would lose the person I still wanted to be. I ended it without drama. No long explanations, no promises to stay in touch. Just a clear boundary and a goodbye that carried more relief than regret. Walking away hurt, but staying would have destroyed me slowly. When it was over, I felt empty again, but this time the emptiness felt honest. Healing didn't happen overnight. Guilt doesn't disappear just because you do the right thing once. It lingered in my thoughts, in quiet moments, in the things I didn't say. But slowly, I began to rebuild in ways that didn't rely on secrecy or escape. I let myself grieve properly. I accepted help without leaning too hard. I learned how to sit with loneliness without letting it make decisions for me. I never told my son what happened. Not because I didn't believe in honesty, but because some truths are meant to be carried, not shared. What mattered was that I showed up differently afterward. More present. More grounded. More careful with the trust he placed in me. He didn't need my confession. He needed my stability. I understand now that grief doesn't just take people from us. It tests who we are when no one is watching. I failed that test once, but I didn't let that failure define the rest of my life. I chose to stop before the damage became permanent. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Being lonely doesn't give us permission to abandon ourselves. And being loved, truly loved the way my son loves me, deserves respect, not secrets. I carry that lesson with me every day, not as punishment, but as a reminder of how close I came to losing what mattered most.